Hello, everyone. I thought I would make a video about the death of physical media. Now, I know I normally talk about books, this includes books, but I'm also a huge movie collector, so I thought that I would talk about it as well. And first, I'm going to talk about the history of physical media in terms of movies. Now, ever since the printing press, people have been able to get their hands on books. There have been times where the rich could afford it and poor people couldn't afford it, but it's been available largely. Books have been available to the public largely since the printing press. Physical media, though, when it comes to movies, that doesn't even go back 50 years in many ways. Because, for example, in 1945, if you were someone in 1945, you could not watch a movie made in 1935. Because the only way you could see a movie then was to go to the movie theater, and after a movie left, you would never see it again unless it was so popular that it got a re-release. So films like Gone with the Wind got frequently re-released, but most films didn't. Sometimes they would only play for a few weeks. That was it. And so then television came along in the 50s, and now people could watch movies that had been made earlier. However, in the 50s, it was mainly horror films and low budget sci-fi films, mainly because the television still, the movie studios still saw television as rivals, so they only wanted to give them things that were cheap and that they wanted to get rid of. In the 60s, television started to show more mainstream films, but it was or A-level films, but it was still, on the network's terms. There were commercials; they had to be edited down. In some cases, they would add footage or even film new footage against, like, sometimes the filmmaker's wishes. Even though those are kind of curious oddities, I'd like to see more of those films that included those sequences, but a lot of them are lost today. But that's the way things were. And also, you couldn't plan when to watch something; it could come on at any time, and people were at the mercy at the networks in terms of what could be shown in terms of movies. But that all changed starting in the late 70s, early 80s, when the home video market basically came to life with VHS. And again, I know that records have existed for long. I'm mainly talking about like visual entertainment. I want to make that clear. I didn't forget about records. Um, but anyway, the you had the VHS market and the Betamax market, which of course VHS won in the 80s and 90s. And for the first time, people could watch a film, and they didn't have to worry about commercials, or they could watch it entirely commercially free whenever they wanted, and they didn't have to be at the mercy of a network. And they basically owned the film. And of course, that was VHS in the 80s and 90s, and then in the 2000s. You had DVD, and then in the 2010s you had Blu-ray, and then towards the end 4K. But now that there are a lot of companies that aren't even releasing their movies on physical media after they leave theaters, or are put on their streaming services, and I think that's really unfortunate because people, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same because people aren't going to have ownership of their films again. They're going to be at the mercy of the streaming services, which are basically a new digital form of the old TV networks. And so it's going back to the way things were 50 years ago, um, which I think is unfortunate because I do think it is. I think streaming can be convenient when trying out titles that if you something that if you don't know if you're going to like it or not, streaming can be convenient. But it's not so convenient when it comes to ownership and that sort of thing. So I do think that that streaming is not convenient in that regard. That physical media is the best way to own things. And yes, I know that physical media can take up things in terms of space, and that it can be expensive in some regards. But I do think it is the better way to go. I think that the best is a combination of different things. I don't think streaming is bad if you use it responsibly, but to just disregard physical media entirely. I use streaming when it comes to checking to basically checking out things that I don't know if I'm going to like. But if I like something, if I really like it, then I want to own it physically, so I can have it. And so, and also, these streaming companies can also edit or change things, and when they can lose the rights, and sometimes you can't find something anywhere on a streaming services because the rights have been pulled, and that's something else. Is that we were at a 10 years ago. I think that the companies were better at film preservation because of all the physical media, but now film preservation has become worse because for example, a streaming services releases a new hot title that they own exclusive rights to, but when a few years later, that title isn't so hot anymore, they could pull it, and you don't know what happens to it. It disappears. So I think streaming has made preserving film worse in that regard, and yeah, it's just unfortunate. And also, I go into the stores now, and I see, and I used to really love going into Barnes and Noble, but it's become a graveyard. They don't really restock anymore, and Walmart has decreased their selections. Best Buy Best Buy has given up, producing physical media, and so I think that in a few years, it's likely that there won't be any. That it's likely that there won't be any you can't won't be able to get physical media except for online or in thrift stores. But then in 10, 20 years after that, I think maybe it'll come back kind of as a nostalgic kind of thing. But I think it's unfortunate. And now books are doing a little bit better because books have been around for thousands of years. But even there, I see, for example, I think that in many bookstores, I don't know. I see, I don't know if they could survive if they didn't have coffee shops in the front of it or something like that. But again, that's a conversation for another day. So yeah, I am definitely an advocate for physical media.